right. Well, welcome to Family Meal at Rethink. This is where we host influential people in food that are really making big impact to try to learn more about what they do and how Rethink can be supportive. This is Kate Mackenzie, the Executive Director of the Food Policy. Is it Food Policy Center? How do you say Food Policy?
It's the Mayor's Office of Food Policy.
For the city of New York.
But I chuckle because we're thinking about different, how we evolve.
Yeah.
But currently we're
the Mayor's Office of Food Policy.
Yes.
Which has been incredibly instrumental in the last couple of years when it comes to everything from more nutritious food for underserved New Yorkers to sustainability to access to healthy vegetables and all different incredible initiatives that have made New York kind of one of the most progressive places for food. Our first question is always like, we have a lot of folks at Rethink and that watch this that are really interested in kind of growing their careers and would love to, be in your shoes someday. And curious, like, what inspired you to kind of go down this road? And then what was your journey to kind of get to this role?
I didn't have sitting in my high school or childhood self saying like, that's what I want to be. In fact, I remember being in elementary school and just the classic question of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I ended up putting like, I'm going to be a children's book author. And that's because my mom was an English teacher and she clearly influenced how I responded to that assignment. So similarly, I would say I was recruited to swim. I was a big swimmer in my youth. And Cornell University said, like, why don't you come get to know our program? And again, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had the advantage of talking to like the team's advisor. And I was very interested in physical therapy. And I had a class in high school, an anatomy class, and I lived in rural Pennsylvania. And one of my friends was living on a dairy farm and they had a stillborn calf. And she asked our teacher if she could bring in the calf as a dissection.
Yeah.
And and I would faint at the sight of blood, really. But going into that experience, it was like the world, really changing for me. And I aced that. I mean, I never got a wrong question in that class after that. And became very interested in science. At Cornell, she was like, you should really do like nutritional sciences. It's a pre-med path. And across the hill at Ithaca College, they have a program where you can really get into exercise physiology. It's just like, okay, someone's telling me what to do it. Yeah. So I did that and I had no idea. Every class I took was like, variations on biology. I understood ultimately through college everything about food once you ate it. But I didn't know much more about that. And my junior year of college, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And it was really, really, really hard. And I decided then that I didn't want to treat disease in my pre-med path. I wanted to prevent it in the first place. But I still had no idea what to do with that. And I was on this path through the nutrition program to become a registered dietitian. And I honestly, I've told the story a few times to people, but I was like, I'm not a dietitian. It sounds like magician or beautician. And it's just like, that's not me. Yeah. And I said, okay, I'm done. And I remember applying to Columbia here in the city the night before the application was due, and lo and behold, I got in. So fast forward, I learned then through that graduate program that I was just doing, not because I was particularly interested in it, but it opened up to me this whole world of everything about food before you ate it. And that's frankly so much more interesting to me, and solidified in me that the idea of teaching someone or coaching someone one life at a time, it's not my cup of tea. Yeah. And I love the idea of how one action, one policy can influence in a positive sense, is my hope, millions of people. Yeah. And so through various different paths, I ended up where I am, and I love the work that we do here in the city. We are so far from perfect, but we every day is different. There's always a new policy. There's always a new perspective. And for me, it's trying to take that incredible honor, privilege, and responsibility of trying to impact all New Yorkers and everything about them and our businesses and our economy for the better. That is the excitement that I have for the kind of work that I do, which is the big systems and changes that influence a lot of people.
Talking about kind of big policy changes and things that have happened, we've been really focused on, and this is more on the federal level, but the waiver 1115 for Medicaid meals. How do you see that program affecting people and the ability to kind of have healthy meals at scale? What do you think will be the outcomes of it?
First of all, I think the connection that people are making about food and health, once again, is not rocket science. We have known this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And how we're able to look at what's happened in different cultures, in different regions, and say, again, not rocket science. You feed people good food, their health is going to improve. But how we move that, and I think as Rethink knows really well, from a demonstration project to a massive systems and policy change, which would take the form of the federal government supporting those preventive approaches of how do we prevent chronic disease in the first place, or even existing chronic disease as it relates to diabetes or something like that. How do we treat people through behavior and eating as opposed to pills? Knowing how the wheels of government can be slow to move, how they're getting primed and how they're getting ready to move, I think is a long time in coming. But I do think that, what's particularly interesting, again, in this country is we have a health crisis and we have a challenge of people not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. And this is the interesting opportunity through Medicaid. So the more and more ways, and again, I know Rethink has more than dabbled in this, is thinking about how a prescription for a meal and delivering that meal to people has such a multiplier effect, not just for that person's health, but for the local business here that you are, the food system, but also just really lifting up people for very positive change. I think we still have unfortunately a long time before we see real change happen. But I do think that this is something that we might see taken farther in the next several years than we may have otherwise. I mean, everything having to do with the broader food system, right? And the bird flu that has now been found in a cow. There's a lot. And I don't wish this upon anyone, but the complexity in which we all live and work, especially at our federal government level, is a lot. Talk about managing curveballs.
Yeah.
So you might be focused on one thing, but you might have to be diverted for something else. And so I think that we always have to, there's a lot happening.
How do you feel about, with the SNAP program, adding some just basic guidelines about what you can and cannot purchase?
We were just talking about chronic disease, and we know over years that the evidence around sugar-sweetened beverages and what that does to people's health is really overwhelming. We know that in cities where they have had taxes, consumption has gone down. We also know that it is really important for people to have a sense of agency over what they are eating. I actually really think now more than ever, and we learned this throughout the pandemic, that people need hot meals.
Yeah.
When we have people who are stressed for time, the majority of people that live in urban and rural areas can be, why can't you go in and get something off the hot bar in the grocery store? Or, even thinking there's small pilots around restaurants now and SNAP. I think that there's sort of like a give and take of if we open up the idea and the possibility that people might be able to buy more with their SNAP dollars, maybe that's a sweetener to saying, let's disincentivize something like SNAP. I think there have to be like some concessions made for people that are actually living and making those choices and feeding their kids and figuring out how do I get them the best thing and how do we open up some opportunities too.
Yeah.
And, like the other thing we know is that where we've incentivized through SNAP the purchase of healthier foods, whether it's beans or fruits and vegetables, of course people are buying more. The nudges, which we've been doing a lot of in New York City, disincentivizing soda in some way is also a nudge that we could make. I think we really have to look at, again, the evidence, but also really talk to people about how would that impact their daily life. And in the environment that we're living in now, I think we have to come to the table with ideas.
Yeah.
And with things that, 5-10 years ago, we maybe never would have thought. But what have we learned over, the course of, these major life experiences, like economic collapses, like pandemics, and also looking at what people are buying and how do we learn from that more than how do we just have a point of view of like, I'm telling people what they should be eating and not eating.
The way we talk about it here is just, one, it is the supplemental nutrition program. And so if that's what it is, let's stick to that. And if there are other means where people can purchase that as a, treat or something like that, that's great. But really focusing on the nutrition, the N in SNAP.
Yeah.
And, but the idea of, recategorizing it entirely to focus on aspects like healthy meals, restaurants that were allowed to do SNAP, allowed to accept SNAP in the pilot that New York State did, our only ask was only restaurants that don't have more than 4 locations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was tricky too. I remember when that was done, it's like, how do you create the criteria that's basically saying, like, I don't want to support the places that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's not what this is about.
Well, we saw what happens. And it happens. We see it when we run out of food at a distribution. People will literally just walk across the street to, chopped cheese sandwich at the bodega. It's $4 or $5 instead of, Are there some things that, this year the city's really excited about in your office? Just big ideas and stuff like that?
The work on schools is really about making sure that as we are very clearly, and I think not everyone, but a lot of people know, we are, as driven through our food standards, reducing the amount of red meat in particular that we're serving and introducing more whole food plant-based proteins. And it's hard. It is freaking hard to get kids to prefer, to choose number one, and then to consistently prefer those foods. So what we've been doing to address that is really paying attention to the staff, right? I look at your staff in your kitchen, and it's one thing to be like, this is the new recipe, make it happen.
No.
And number one, it's like, A, they may not have the skill to make it happen. But number two, no one has explained why the recipe has suddenly changed and why it's more work and how are you going to support them to do that. So really investing a lot in the culinary staff across the school food system to begin with. And that has yielded like amazing results from a consistency point of view. It's one thing, again, to go to a school in one neighborhood in Brooklyn and then another one in the Bronx and see the same thing that's supposed to be on the menu executed in very different ways. So looking a lot at like the skills it takes to cook and really paying attention and by and large, most people want to do their job better. And they want the professional development and skills to be able to do something even better. So we've taken that model of working in schools to Department of Correction, specifically Rikers, as well as our juvenile justice centers. They deserve to eat good food in the same way that everyone does. And that's the sort of ethos that we have, is like, you can be at a homeless shelter, you can be at our school system, you can be at Rikers, and you deserve the best food possible. So finally, we had a piece come out in the Times yesterday that documented what we've been doing at Rikers.
Oh, wow.
And so similarly, we partnered with an organization here, Hot Bread Kitchen, to be able to go in on the island and train the staff. And we are imagining how we might have a center for nutrition and culinary excellence that will maintain an ability for us to do this kind of work across our city workforce and then our partner workforce, right? And really pay attention to not just like the food standards that we have, that we're, forever proud of, but how they get executed. I think the other thing that we have in the city is an ability to fully recognize the role that our food system has in our climate emergency. So I think everyone here will know that all of this stuff that we're talking about around the reason why we make food healthier, less meat, more beans, more fruits and vegetables and whole grains, is also the best thing for our environment. So trying to lead from a city perspective about, yes, we care about our buildings and our transportation system, but we also are really paying attention to the role our food system has in our climate crisis. So we're going to really refine some specific strategies around food and climate. That's exciting for us. And really just, we've introduced a lot of new things over the years. And it's not just, I feel very personally, it's not just about publishing things. It's about operationalizing them and then learning from them and tweaking them.
Can you talk more about the good food purchasing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
My lovely predecessor, Barbara, was trying to get the city to fully embrace something called good food purchasing. And what that means is we know that the food we buy, that you all buy at home, right? It's like, why are you making that choice? It might be because of its price. It could also be you want to support a local farm or a local business. It could be that you care about the environment. It could be that you care about food has so many different attributes to it that we believed as a city, and continue to do so, that we aren't just it's not like buying cups or buying, pencils where you can pretty much go with the lowest price and, count yourself has gotten a deal. But it's not a deal if it's actually creating health problems for people. It's not a deal if we're buying food from businesses that are really awful violators of labor standards. So and what the mayor did within this first 3 months was sign an executive order that didn't require us to buy certain kinds of foods, because we could have a whole other chat about the complexities of procurement and legal standards there. But what we did was just say, you need to show us, you need to tell us where all of these things about food. So, you think I'm looking at somebody maybe chopping onions. We want to know not just who did you buy those onions from, but where were they grown, what farm, and when were they harvested. So all of that background can then help us show the real story of our food. How much is coming from New York State? How much is, how many pounds of animal products are we buying? And ultimately, how are we reducing that? So by getting this type of data, the three things that we are absolutely committed to, number one is following our food standards. And so we have agency compliance to that. But we're also really committed to driving down the carbon footprint of our food. And the secret there is not a secret. All you have to do is buy less meat, and ideally dairy.
One question that we always ask everybody before we go to the AI Bowl is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Always be a deep listener for what you don't know. So I find that when I'm not checking myself, I can be thinking about, really want to make sure that I say this to Matt, so I'm not really in the moment, right? And rather than trying to make my point, I'm going to miss what you're actually saying to me. Yeah. So I really try and like not say, these are the things I absolutely have to say in the course of a meeting, or these are the things that, like, it's really about maybe I will change my mind based on what somebody has said to me. So be open to that changing of a mind and just more open-minded in general. Just asking questions. I mean, this is a basic thing, but I never let it go. I used to be, again, my imposter syndrome has been with me my entire life, but sitting in a class and being like, I have no idea how to even follow this conversation. And no one would ask a question. But the minute that I got up the nerve to ask a question, everyone's like, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. And I remember in my professional career, I hated the word policy. I was intimidated by anything having to do with a policy change. But it was when I stopped and asked the questions of like, wait a minute, like what does the Farm Bill do and how does that happen? It opened up, again, like once you learn the systems, once you learn what might seem like a really complex thing, you're able to do so much more. So it's really just like, I was on a call with an agency today. And I was like, tell me exactly this, like, how does this move? And just pausing, because everyone on the call will benefit from it. Really think about advice in the receiving and giving a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer. That's like our main core value here is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So I always tell people when they're onboarded, like, if you don't know, it's okay. Just say I don't know. If you really like this project.
That's it. Saying you don't know.
Yeah.
And supporting people with like, I get it. I'd rather you tell me that than like go through the faking it only to upset us both.
Yeah, just go ahead, take a question. And
if you could magically fix one thing about our food system overnight, what would you choose? It's very hard for a city to influence, which is why I'm not then tasking myself to do this, is labor.
Yeah.
Is labor, especially right now. When, the majority of our labor in the state and in this country is immigrant labor.
Okay.
And we're going to have a lot of problems if we don't address that in some way. And by addressing it, I mean actually paying people for the work and the time and the effort that they excel at. But I think labor in our food system is the very dark and dirty underbelly of how we have so much food in this country. What's a food that you didn't like as a child but have grown to love as an adult?
Yeah, that's it there.
I hated tomatoes. I was in Florida, and I was there for a swim meet, actually, and I was like, all right, there was a tomato salad or something. And I was like, I'm a grown-up now, I'm going to eat this. Yeah. I was like 16. Yeah. But it was so tasty. It was so good. Yeah. But again, it's sort of like, if we were to go anywhere on the street now and get a tomato, it would be the same experience that I had as a kid because it's like out of season, it's gross.
I'm curious from your perspective, thinking about the school setting, where is there still opportunity for nonprofits to be plugging in?
With public schools, to support everything that's happening in the cafeteria. And the mayors, it's like we want a culture of wellness in the schools so that when you walk in, you are like, I'm going to make I'm going to make the right choice because I'm understanding why I should do that. Like you don't have, and I don't think any of the schools do anymore, but like there used to be like vending machines everywhere, right? And or you're seeing pictures of actual food to support that. But we're doing a series of food education grants in schools that at the school level, they can determine who they want to work with. There's a lot of nonprofits that actually don't even want money. They just want to know what school to go to. So we're trying to do some matchmaking with that. But similarly, we're also developing food education standards for each grade-ish, for second through fourth graders. These are the learning objectives. So we're trying to map those standards to what is in the existing curriculum so that we know directionally our fifth graders are getting this topic, right? Or conversely, it's like we know that we want them to get this, but we don't have any curricula to get there. So where is that an opportunity for us? So we're trying to figure out how they can meet these standards through existing curriculum. We have such a plethora of extraordinary nonprofit and service providers in this city, and this is what they do best. We want to provide opportunities for those organizations to really go into schools and do what they do best, because what works in Coney Island is probably going to be very different than Washington Heights. I've seen this organization move through since it was a concept to where it is now, and it is so amazing to see the risks, to see the like greatness of where you've landed and will continue to land. And I think, again, just as a leader in this space, to be able to be, and I think you model it, vulnerable to all the learning and all the curveballs that come at you. But again, it's the team that you create and that you foster and clearly just do it so well. So you guys, it's just see something and ask, or a need or a idea from Rethink, and you just sort of like stop and really like, let's hear it. Let's do this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.